clowns. 2-5, Mr. Logical, we run this town. Real talk only, no chasing, no doubt. From the east to the west, it's the order we shout. Mic check, lights flash, game time, stay ready. 2 vets in the zone, keep the pressure real heavy. Big hits, big plays, yeah, we breaking it down. Truth rings in your speakers, every word is the crown. From the north side hustle to that southern flame. Midwest grind, west coast of the game. Sports talk kings, yeah, we wear that crown. Turn it up, let them know it's about to go down. Sports reports, no gimmicks, no clowns. 2-5, Mr. Logical, we run this town. Real talk only, no chaser, no doubt. From the east to the west, it's the order we shout.
It's about to go down.
Hey.
Yes. 2-5 is here, y'all. Sports Reports is ordered. Got some business to tend to tonight. You know, it was a big weekend of football. College football is officially back. I know we had week 0, but this was the time that we actually got to live it up all day long. We didn't have to worry about any Idaho States being in one of our windows, getting in the middle of our fun. No disrespect to the Bengals, of course. But look, let's take it right from the top. You know, all day yesterday, all the apologists were in their feelings, crying, whining about the reaction to Arch. Okay, let's explore that for a minute. So Arch Manning was hailed as this generational talent without doing a damn thing. Now, we've seen this before, right? You know, we've seen people like LeBron James come up through the media. You know, he was a big deal in high school. ESPN was even playing all his games. But the difference is that he was playing against the best. He was the best. And then it was just about what he was going to do from there. Compare that to Arch Manning, you know, who was playing against lesser competition in high school. He wasn't going up against the best of the best. He comes to Texas. He sits behind Quinn Ewers. And I'm not even going to get into the conversation about, hey, should a generational talent be sitting behind Quinn Ewers? Not even going to do that. Not even going to do that. Because Quinn Ewers earned his spot. And regardless of what you have to say about him, the biggest knock that I have on Quinn Ewers was that he was injury prone. Okay. So now we see Arch a couple of times last year, you know, when Quinn Ewers was going through one of those injuries. You know, he played against Mississippi State, had the long run, looked great against the worst team in the SEC that didn't win an SEC game, by the way. Then he played UL Monroe, and you look at it, it's like, okay, 51.7% completion percentage, 2 touchdowns and 2 picks. Hardly generational. And I'm not even trying to say he can't have a bad game. So, of course, you fast forward later into the season, they played Georgia, right? And it was at home. Quinn Ewers was ineffective. So they decided, hey, you know what? Let's give this guy some reps. Let's see if he can, you know, give us some momentum. You know, he ran a couple of Georgia was on him. They were on him. There was no way around that defense. And he looked shell-shocked. But again, not saying that he can't be generational after that. But that was the evidence that we had coming into this season. All right? So then the first game of the season, going to Columbus, Ohio to play Ohio State. You respect that. They're playing a tough game that they didn't have to play. They could have went out here and played Marshall like Georgia did. You know, they could have played Western Illinois like the Illini did. But they went up to the Horseshoe. Okay. Now, he gets up there, big game, playing against another quarterback who is even more of a rookie, if you want to use that terminology, Julian Sayin. And yes, Texas outplayed Ohio State for the most part. They ended up with more yardage, you know, controlled the game a little bit better. Ohio State just made the bigger plays. But then everybody started talking about, well, you know, it's his first start of the season and, you know, he's going up to Columbus and Yeah, I know, the same way that Jameis Winston went to Pitt, and I know Pitt ain't Ohio State, but just making the point of if you're generational, you just make it work. I'm not asking you to throw for 400 yards. I'm just asking you to be smart and be on time with the football. Now, you got a good coach in Sark who didn't have his best day either when it comes to play calling and just not looking the part, not being ready for that action. But I would also argue maybe Sark pulled back a little bit because Arch wasn't ready for that moment. You know what I mean? Like if they were playing, say, New Mexico, maybe he looks good and Sark lets it go. But in a game like that, you knew possessions were going to be important. You knew it was going to come down to the wire, which it did. So you probably want to play it a little more close to the vest if you don't think your quarterback can be what he needs to be. Now, contrast that with Notre Dame and Miami, right? We saw CJ Carr come in. You know, they put the training wheels on, early screen passes, little short dumps, dink and dunk here and there. But then when the game was on the line, they were down 21-7. They said, hey, yo, I'm sorry, CJ. You got to go get this for us. And he damn near did it. You know what I'm saying? So Arch, you know, I'm not going to blame him for the fourth down play. He was under duress. Granted, you got to throw it to the sticks at least. But he was under duress, so I'm not even going to knock him for that. You know what I'm saying? But I will knock him for that throw on third down. And this is the problem when the media creates you, is that you have all these apologists that didn't want to be wrong or didn't want to be patient. I have no doubt in my mind that Arch is going to be a good quarterback by the end of this season. I don't think Texas is going to win the national title. I never did. Okay? But I would like to think that he's going to improve throughout the year. The problem is that people didn't want to allow that to happen. They just wanted day one, come out here and look like Peyton. That's wrong. You know, you did nothing but put undue pressure on that kid. Now, and on top of that, he's been in the system 3 years. So there's only so much leeway I want to give with that. So then, of course, the big question is, you know, should Ohio State be number one? Should LSU be number one? And it depends on your train of thought. You know, if you're the type of person that thought Texas was number one and Ohio State beat them, you know, Julian Sand outplayed Arch. It was at home, so you got to factor that in. But if you're the type of person that thought that, then Ohio State's number one. You know what I mean? If you value, forget those numbers beside the names. Let's just look at the teams. Let's look at the performance. Let's look at the result. You look at a team like LSU, went into Clemson, and left the Smackoff down. Like, yeah, they were down in the third quarter, but if you go back and look at it, Clemson never established the run. Antonio Williams got hurt in the first quarter. But this is what we saw with Clemson throughout all last season. And I talked about this on Sports Reports Order during our ACC preview, during our playoff talk. Clemson, when they play teams that are equal in talent or even slightly better, they fold. They get punked around. You were in your home in Death Valley in Memorial Stadium, Howard's rocking the whole 9 yards. LSU came in there with the 1-0 t-shirts and said, no, I reject your deposit. So if you don't value the preseason top 25, which I don't, you could make the argument for LSU at number one. The problem is that LSU started out number 9. They beat number 4 versus the number 3 who beat the number 1. So if you value the opinions of the media who is just participating in groupthink, then you think Ohio State's number 1, even though they didn't necessarily look great either. And that's the thing. All these teams are breaking in new pieces. So who are you and how are you to say these teams are number 1 through 25? You don't know. You're just guessing off of names, off of heritage and tradition, right? Because look at Alabama, right? And I ain't going to bang on Alabama too hard. I picked Alabama to win the national title. So I ain't going to bang on them too hard. But let's just say, you know, Florida State got 50 new players damn near. They got a whole new coaching staff with a guy who has had success against Alabama before. And yet people were out here talking about, yo, Bama by 30. You know what I'm saying? Can Florida State score 10? In my preview, I picked Alabama, but I told you, Florida State was going to score on Alabama. I ain't expect it to look like that. I'm happy as a Florida State fan that we won that game, But I would have never in a million years said that we would have punked Alabama that way. And now this goes back to Kalen DeBoer, right? I'm not going to jump on the media train of, oh, he needs to be fired. He's not the right coach for the job. I think he's a great coach. He just got out-coached. It happens. You know what I mean? There's been times where Nick Saban got out-coached since everybody wants to bring him up. But it's kind of hard to lose when you got your Derrick Henrys and people like that in the backfield, right? But anyway, I ain't trying to get into that conversation. But Kalen DeBoer had it made. All money ain't good money. I learned that from playing Bones as a young adolescent, right? He could have been the man at Washington. He would have been an absolute legend. Year 2, he took him to the national title game. But you don't turn down Alabama. And now look at you. You know what I mean? Basically, what, an 8-5 record as their head coach? People talking about you need to be fired already. With the transfer portal taking over the sport the way that it has, who's to say that Alabama is not UCLA basketball right now? Yeah, you'll make your Final Four runs every so often, but for the most part, we're going to look at you like, where are they? And I mean, and look at the SEC this year. It's a gauntlet. You know, y'all believe in Texas. I don't. I do like Texas A&M. LSU is obviously a good team. We're going to see Georgia once they get against some good competition. I want to see Missouri's defense against Kansas this weekend. The border war. I've been talking about that all summer. I want to see that, right? You know, you got Ole Miss and Austin Simmons. Look at Jackson Arnold and his legs down on the plains. Look at what they did to Baylor. So the SEC is by no means a given for any of these teams. So all it takes is September 27th, Alabama to go into Athens and beat Georgia. They beat them last year. Dominated them, actually, until Georgia made a comeback when they took their foot off the gas. But Georgia's got September the 13th going to Knoxville on their schedule. So let's not jump to any conclusions. We can have conversations. You can speak your opinion. We can't make these definitive statements unless you're just trying to be clickbaity. Could be a thing. But, you know, but even going beyond that, I brought up UCLA basketball. Let's talk about UCLA football. Nico Iamaleava, you know, wanted the money, right? You know, he was asking for money during the playoffs last year when they got spanked by Ohio State. He came back to Tennessee this offseason. Sounded like he still wasn't happy. So he went off to UCLA. And guess what? He got less money than he was going to make at UT this year. Right? And now UCLA is probably looking at him like we wanted a return on our investment. This is not what I expected from another golden child. Because remember, Nico came into UT last year, not necessarily with arch hype, but people were definitely on the bandwagon talking about how he was going to be the next college football quarterback. He was going to be the next quarterback that Josh Heupel was going to make a star out of, a la Hendon Hooker. And I just don't know if it's in there. Now, granted, right, Utah is always going to play sound defense. 43-10, though, you know, not even 150 yards, 50% completion percentage. But if I would have said that about Arch, I would have been called a hater, right? He threw for 170, though. But when it goes back to Nico, you know, it didn't help that Joey Aguilar came into Tennessee and looked good on Saturday. But I remind you, they were playing the Orange. Now, I myself had the Orange at 4-8, and that's heavily dependent on can they beat Boston College or Pitt. If they beat neither one of them, you could be looking at a 2-10 team because they lost the passing leader last year at NCAA, Kyle McCord. They lost LaQuint Allen. Trevor Pena is in Happy Valley right now. So I'm just saying, it's week 1. Slow down. It's okay to project. It's okay to predict. It's also okay to admit when you're wrong, like I was when I picked Bama over Florida State. And that's my team, so you know that hurts. But anyway, but the point being is that we don't know anything about these teams. Now, you go over to Boulder on Friday night. The Haynes King Show. I told everybody before the season started, look out for, here's that date again, September 13th. Clemson is going down to Bobby Dodd. to play the Ramblin' Wreck. So the Ramblin' Wreck opened up the season with Coach Prime in Colorado. And I know, I make people mad because I don't drink the Coach Prime Kool-Aid. I love Coach Prime. He went to Florida State. You know what I mean? But I got to tell you what I think the truth is. I'm not going to sit up here and glaze him and sit around and talk about how he's this great coach or he's going to do great things, because I don't believe he is. Now, and I see the blame is already being put on Pat Shurmur for the game on Friday night. And my response to that is the same thing that I said when people get on Kyle Shanahan for 28-3. Was he the head coach? Does the head coach not have the authority, power, and right to tell you stop doing that or do this instead? Colorado was effective running the ball in the first quarter, but everybody wants to be pretty and pass happy. Kaidon Salter's not that type of quarterback. We saw him at Liberty. We know that's not his game. They threw the ball way too much. And, and this is the other problem with it. Not that you even threw it too much, but the type of pass plays that they were calling. They were always going for the big shot, saying that he's not that type of quarterback. He's more of that, can something out of nothing, throwing on the run, reacting to blown assignments and finding the wide open receiver or when the DB is looking dead at him instead of the receiver. That's the kind of guy that Kaidon Salter is. Like, you might be better off running an offense similar to what Georgia Tech just did to you. Right? You got Delaware this week, so you should get right back on track. But there is no excuse for that drive to close out the game up in Boulder. Deion, they talk about the rich people all the time, and they tell the rich people, like, hey, you can't take all that money with you when you go. You can't take those timeouts with you, Prime. Use them. Especially when you, like I said, you don't have that type of quarterback that's going to hit passes with precision in a 2-minute drill for you to keep the offense flowing. You got to be smart. Throw it to the sideline. Let him use his legs a little bit. Dump it off. Just get down the field the best way that he can. Not the best way you want to, the best way that he can. Put your players in a position to be successful. So while we're talking about quarterbacks, who knew that Las Cruces, New Mexico, and the New Mexico State Aggies was such a haven for quarterbacks? Diego Pavia went down there. He took over. He won at Auburn. While he was at New Mexico State, he comes to the SEC to Vanderbilt of all places. He beats Bama in the first year, and he wins at Auburn again. He's got 2 wins on the Plains. And then you got, Devin Dampier over at Utah. We already talked about what they did to Nico. So watch out for Utah. They are a playoff contender. I'm not going to put them there yet because I don't believe UCLA is a good team. Now, the team that I did pick to win the Big 12, Kansas State didn't look so great again either. 48-45 against North Dakota. I didn't say North Dakota State. I didn't say the Bison. I said North Dakota. I don't know how that works. But, I thought that Chris Kleiman had a handle on things. One of the better coaches in the Big 12, in my opinion. Maybe I was wrong. Nah, I ain't going to do that. But, Kansas State is a much better team than they've shown. Whereas, maybe they were hungover, but that didn't apply to Iowa State because Iowa State came out here 55-7 over South Dakota. So, great, because you know what? They're 2-0. Iowa State I'm talking about. They're 2-0. And this week is the battle for the Cyhawk. The Hawkeyes are coming into Ames. And we know, if we don't know anything else, Iowa State hasn't had much success against Iowa in the last, say, 10 years or so. So keep your eye on that game for upset alert. Just throwing that out there right now. I brought up the border war, Kansas and Missouri. Kansas looks like a well-oiled machine against weak competition. Missouri looked great against weak competition. So Bo Pribula, you're on the clock now. The big rival is coming in. Y'all haven't played them since 2012. It's time to lay the hammer down if Missouri is going to be the team that we think that they can be capable of being. Now, I don't think that Missouri is a national title contender, but that schedule definitely sets up for them to make the playoff. So that's first and foremost. So now you just got to go get it done. And now Bama looks compromised. All right, Missouri, you got something in front of you now. We're going to find out about Oklahoma this weekend when Michigan comes calling. Bryce Underwood against New Mexico, he looks the part. Now, I think Oklahoma has one of the better defenses in the country, so we're definitely going to find out this weekend how good he is. But I tell you what, that guy got some zip on the football. I mean, he was throwing 5-yard hitch routes and curls that looked like it was going to take the receiver's face off. So, you know what I mean? Can he dial that down a little bit to make the touch passes necessary? Is he going to have to take over with his legs? I'm here for it. I'm leaning Oklahoma very early before I dig into it, but I'm leaning Oklahoma right now. Now, let's talk about my Seminoles for a second. Of course, I'm ecstatic. You know, this was the type of unpredictability that I haven't seen in a long time. And I'm not talking about just Florida State. I'm talking about in general, watching a football game, not knowing what play is coming, who the ball is going to, and all that stuff. Held Ryan Williams under 100 yards for the 10th straight game. He hasn't done that since the game against Georgia. Hope you get well, young man. And, you know, if this season goes off the rails, there's a possibility that he's not at Bama next year. This is the way that this stuff is working nowadays. But, you know, we got Miami coming up in a few weeks. You know how they looked last night against Notre Dame, and I don't want to hear nothing about young quarterback in that game because that game was all about the trenches. Both of those teams, strengths on both lines. Miami just outplayed them. You know, Notre Dame showed heart, just like Marcus Freeman teams tend to do. But now Notre Dame's at an impasse, right? They got A&M coming up there in 2 weeks. I got A&M making the playoffs, so that tells you already I had A&M winning that game before the season started. So could Notre Dame start off 0-2 for the first time in Marcus Freeman's tenure? They damn sure can. You know, so Marcel Reed, another year under his belt. Got the running backs back. Reuben Owens, you know, got Le'Veon Moss back. Went and got KC Concepcion from NC State, who was one of the better players in the country last year that nobody cared about because he went to NC State. Now that he's in the SEC, maybe you'll hear a little bit more about him, but don't be surprised if you do. And I'm going to just leave it at that. So as we continue to go around the country, you know, Tulane, they were my G5 pick to make the playoff this year. They got the first Power 4 win out the way. You know, Northwestern didn't want to let them wear their white uniforms to honor Katrina. They got the smackdown 23-3. David Braun, one of these coaches on the hot seat. You know, I'm just saying, you know, especially now that Pat Fitzgerald was found not liable or whatever terminology for the hazing that allegedly was going on in the Northwestern locker rooms and everything. You got to get results now. I'm sorry. You know what I'm saying? Tulane still has Duke left. They still have Ole Miss left. They don't have to win both of those. Just win one. And just don't get your ass kicked in the second one. You could lose. Just don't lose 38-14. That's the way college football is working right now. Speaking of which, same thing, right? Ashton Jeanty is in the NFL. I don't know why people thought Boise was going to go down there and whoop South Florida. South Florida is a talented team with a head coach that I think is going to be a great Power 4 head coach when his number gets called. Alex Golesh. Bynum Brown has been on the verge of stardom for years. He just plays in the American and he gets hurt sometimes. But, you know, South Florida is on Tulane. I'm telling you, like, Tulane is not walking away with the American. And speaking of the American, what the hell happened to Army? Tarleton State? Probably a future CUSA member. You know, so I'm excited, you know, for these teams. You know, Delaware, like I said, is going to play Colorado this weekend. Missouri State probably should have been an FBS team. You know, they've been having aspirations for years. I'm here for it. Friday night, I'm here for it. James Madison, another one of those G5 teams that could end up in the playoff, going over to Louisville, Kentucky to get some Miller Moss. I'm here for that game. You know, Matt Schluka, you remember him from UNLV? He was the one that said, UNLV didn't pay me. Well, I hope James Madison does, because a great season is ahead, and that's my pick to win the Sun Belt. So there you go. Now, so as I look around the nation, what do I see? I see a lot of instability. And of course, like I said, a lot of that is brought on from the transfer portal, because nobody could have expected Florida State to do what they did the other day, ran for 230 plus yards against Alabama, held Alabama to 87 yards on 29 carries. No one could have saw that coming. Even if you thought Florida State was going to win, you probably didn't think it was going to happen like that. And don't put this game on Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson was out there running for his life, and I think he did a great job considering those circumstances. Ryan Grubb will get it right. You know, Kalen DeBoer will get it right. I'm not saying that Bama won't lose another game this season, but it's not doom and gloom. I don't see 7-5. I don't see 8-4. Like, realistically, you look at the Georgia game on September 27th, and it's just because it's between the hedges that you feel like that could be a loss. I'm not sure how good Georgia is. I'm not sure how good Gunnar Stockton is, because even against a weak Marshall team the other day that half of its players went to Southern Miss, he didn't look good when he had to make decisions. I ain't going to quite say it was Justin Fields like, but it was very 1, 2, 3, first read, boom, looks great. Everybody looks great in that scenario, even Justin Fields, right? But when it went 1, 2, 3, hold on, let me look up. What? I don't know what to do. It didn't look so great. So the numbers might look good when you look at the box score, but actually peeling it back, looking at some tape and just watching him, I still got questions. And if Alabama has any heart and motivation, they can cause him problems. And like I said, September 13th in Knoxville, Tennessee's got defense. Colton Hood, you know, SEC Defensive Player of the Week. Don't sleep on the balls. Like, I'm just saying, it's too early in the season to be sleeping on anybody. You know, I'm just saying. You know, Illinois and Duke this weekend, that's a big one. You know, the winner of that game is going to set themselves up real nice. You know, especially Illinois with all the returning production that they have. They're one of the sleeper teams that I've seen people say have a chance to win the Big Ten. I don't know if they have that type of talent. You know, they lost McCray. They lost Zachary Franklin. They lost Pat Bryant. So I'm not sure if they're at that level. But I will say we haven't seen Ohio State on the road yet. You know what I'm saying? We haven't seen Michigan on the road yet. That's to come. We haven't seen Michigan against a team with a pulse. That is to come. So before I count out the Illini, before you count out the Illini, let's get it right. And props to Oregon, because I thought that Montana State was going to give them a little bit more trouble than they did. Speaking of the Pacific Northwest, the Palouse, out there on the Palouse, the Idaho Vandals, you know, less than 15 miles away, took Washington State to overtime. Not a good look. But on the other hand, Wake Forest and Kennesaw State, one of those CUSA teams, 10-9. Rich Rod and those guys in West Virginia put it on somebody. Pitt put up 61 on Duquesne. I mean, Duquesne, right? You know, but I'm just saying, the backyard brawl is going to be entertaining, you know, when it gets here. So look, when it comes down to it, and I already said what I said about preseason rankings, so I'm not going to get too much deeper into that conversation. I'm just going to say that you won't hear any top 25 coming from me until at least at the very earliest at the end of week 4. So that way I can sit down, dissect these teams, look at it, and come correct. Because there's no reason to be ranking teams right now, because now you have these debates that I brought up earlier, LSU or Ohio State, when if there wasn't a number there, you could have a real conversation. But Ohio State probably becomes number 1 just off of default, even though they didn't look great their damn selves. But that's all I'll say about that. Moving on. Nebraska still didn't look that great. Raiola, aka Baby Mahomes, with his little hand gesture and everything. Cincinnati lost that game more than Nebraska won it. So I know this is Matt Rule year 3. They better get with it. Tony White is over here in Tallahassee. So I don't know how good the black shirts are going to be long-term throughout the course of this season. You can do that against a team like Cincinnati that's being coached by a guy like Scott Satterfield, who's not necessarily a bad coach per se, but he's just not a good coach. I guess the way I'll label that, that's the way I'll label that one. But look, y'all, college football coming at y'all hot and heavy. We got the NFL starting this week, Eagles and Cowboys on Thursday. Chiefs and Chargers on Friday. Mr. Logical and I will be back tomorrow to talk about the AFC North as we dwindle down our NFL previews. We got the AFC North and the AFC West left. So for those of you that are into those type of things, go back and look at our previews. Let us know what you think. Tell us where we got it wrong. Let us know where you agree. But until then, I am 2-5. Like, review, subscribe, share, rate, do all the free things. Do all the good things, and make sure you sip in a liquid death while you do it. Sports Reports is ordered. Out.
Real heavy, big hits, big plays, yeah, we breaking it down. Truth rings in your speakers, every word is the crown. From the north side hustle to that southern flame, Midwest grind,
Peace.
West Coast of the game.